Here's a short video to show you something else you can do with your TI-83 or 84 calculator in Unit 9.4. When you go through the collaboration, you're going to be finding entries in a two-way table just like we did for Unit 9.3. You'll have some observed values and then also expected values that you will calculate from the two-way tables. Using the formula for expected values, E equals row total times column total divided by grand total. We were doing this in Unit 9.3, and it just repeats again in 9.4 for a different application. Once we have those values, then we needed to find the chi-square value, which came about from a formula finding the sum of the fraction observed minus expected squared divided by expected. And we can do that, and you're going to be doing that in Unit 9.4. But if you want to find the chi-square value and then also the p-value, you can use your TI-83 or 84 to do that as well, just from the tables when you finish finding the observed and expected values. Most likely the observed values are given to you. In Unit 9.4 you do fill in a few things on your own, and then the expected values, you find those. So you will reach this table at some point in 9.4 when you work on the collaboration. And the numbers that are bolded, I'm circling them here in red, those are your observed values. You'll see that in the unit. The other numbers that are italicized, those are the expected values. So it does become a lot of work to find the difference of these observed and expected, and then square them, and then divide by the expected value. So what I'm going to show you is how you can enter those numbers into not lists on your TI-83 or 84, but into what's called a matrix. So I'm going to bounce over to my calculator app so I can show you that, and I'm going to enter all these numbers. Okay, so on the calculator, you're going to first press the second button, and then you want to look for a word that is matrix, just like the movies, if you remember those. It's on the left side, and you'll see it just says the word matrix. Another symbol that's next to it is an X with a -1. I push that button, and you'll get to a screen where you have names of matrices. What we want is edit. So you can use your direction buttons to get over to edit. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to edit matrix A. And if you take a look at that table of values, you see that you have 3 rows. The rows are very, moderately, and little or none. Those are our rows that we have. So I've got 3 rows, and then my columns, there are 4 of those. Northeast, Midwest, South, and East. We don't count the totals for the columns or the rows. So I type in a 3 for the number of rows, and then a 4 for the number of columns. On the calculator itself, like on the TI-83, when you look at that on the edit screen, you have to type in those numbers and push enter. It doesn't say row or column, but just know that the row number is first and the column number is second. So you want it to say 3 by 4. It looks like a 3x4. Once you have that, then we're just going to enter the numbers just as we have them in the table. So the first row for my observed values is 105, 95, 145, and 55. The second row I'm going to type in is 80, 60, 100, and 10. And then the third row is 115, 95, 105, and 35. Now that we're finished with the matrix that represents the observed values, I'm going to go back to my second and matrix menu, click on Edit, and then click on B. Here we need a similar size matrix, 3 rows and 4 columns. So you want 3 by 4 for the dimensions. And now I'll enter in the expected values. So starting again with row 1, that's what I had here circled in blue. I have 120, 100, 140, and 40 as my first row for the expected. So 140, actually 120, 100, 140, and 40. And then the second row is 75, 62.5, 87.5, and 25. And then the third row is 105, 87.5, 122.5, and 35. Once I've got those entered, now we're going to run a test. This is going to be a chi-square test. And we get to that test the same way that we had done before, by pressing the Stat button and then going to Tests. And then down towards the bottom on the calculator, it's a couple of lines before the ANOVA test that we ran, we have the chi-square test. So we click on that, and it's going to ask you to tell it which matrix is the observed. So you'll see here that I've got A listed as my observed, and then my expected is B. And then with that, you'll see I've got some statistics. If you look at the lower right of the screen right now, you can see chi-square is 23.24285,714. You also have that the p-value is 7.19, but don't forget the e-4 off to the right. And it also reminds you of the degrees of freedom, which is 6. So if I go back to my notes here, we found that our chi-square value was 23.24 if we round that to 2 decimal places. The p-value is 7.19, but e-4 means that we move the decimal point and it gives us 3 zeros before the 7 shows up. So when you round it to 4 decimal places, that's the p-value. That's what you'll have to do in 9.4. And then the degrees of freedom, exactly like we saw in section 9.3, it's the rows minus 1 times the columns minus 1, which in our case is going to be 3 minus 1 times 4 minus 1, which is 2 times 3, which is 6. So you get all of that without having to do the subtraction, the squaring, and the division, and then adding all of that stuff for the chi-square value. So I definitely encourage you to try to use this when you're working through 9.4, just to verify that it works. You could do the same thing with the review sheets as well. You certainly don't have to do it that way, but it does certainly save a lot of time if you do that.